I'm at more of the Action Network, and here are the top 4 NBA storylines for peak Messi season, aka free agency. Number 1, the Jimmy Butler situation in Miami. Now, on the surface, everything's fine in Miami. Jimmy Butler's under contract for another year, final year of his contract in Miami. Should be totally fine, except that he's extension eligible, and it's known that Butler obviously is looking for that last big NBA contract. A number of teams are willing to give that to him, including the Philadelphia 76ers have already been reported as being willing to give Butler that extension were he to be traded to them. So that's an option if Butler goes that direction, unless the Heat decide they're going to go ahead and give him the same amount. League sources have told Action Network that Butler's preference is to stay in Miami. That's also been reported by The Athletic, Shams Charania, that he wants to finish his career in Miami. But that's going to create a lot of tension, I think, in the Miami front office, given that it's going to mean giving Butler a contract basically until he's 40 on max money. That's going to cause a little bit of tension. So will the two sides be able to come to an agreement? And if not, will Miami facilitate a trade of Butler to another team in order for him to get that max extension? Number 2, Paul George. The Clippers do not view Paul George as the same level as Kawhi Leonard. Now, that doesn't really make a lot of sense given that Paul George has been more available, has been excellent for them, and has been really a more consistent leader for them. But for whatever reason, after giving Kawhi Leonard the extension they did last year, they have not offered the same level of money to Paul George, meaning that he is definitely open to leaving with a player option this summer. The Philadelphia 76ers were mentioned early as a potential option for him. You're going to hear the Sixers mentioned a lot in these videos from me and pretty much everyone else because they have all the money in all the world to spend on players like George. But the question is just really what other teams are going to get into the race for George. He'll have a number of suitors given where he's at in his career and the ability for him to still be effective as a wing that can score, handle, and defend. The New York Knicks are always mentioned as linked to Paul George, but I will say that I've heard that from league sources about 4 different times over the years, and it never really comes to pass. At this point, you're going to have to show me Paul George in a Knicks uniform in order for me to believe it. Number 3, the Hawks. Okay, so the Hawks have the number 1 pick, and that's great, but this is an awful draft, and so they're going to have to figure out who they want with that top pick, and it's not really clear. Also, there's going to be a number of teams that are probably interested in trading up for either Alex Sarr or potentially Klingon. If one of those teams is willing to give the Hawks multiple assets, and the Hawks still feel they can get their preferred guy down the board, it is possible the Hawks could actually trade out of the number 1 pick. What could go wrong, really, for making a trade out of the number 1 pick? Although, hey, worked okay for the Boston Celtics, didn't it? Meanwhile, the Hawks are not done with trades either. After dangling Dejounte Murray at the deadline, not being able to come to an agreement for a deal for Murray, there is an expectation that one of Trae Young or Dejounte Murray will be traded, not both. That's off the table. The Hawks are not looking for a complete rebuild. They do want to have some semblance of a roster to build with going forward, whether that's with Young or Murray. They're open to moving one or the other, and they're going to continue to canvass the market to see what comes out of it. But one of those two players is likely to remain with Atlanta alongside whoever they do draft in this year's draft. And finally, how about the Cleveland Cavaliers? League sources expect Donovan Mitchell to sign a 4-year deal with a 4th-year player option, which allows him to hit that 10 years of service, allowing him to get a even bigger raise at the end of this next contract. But there is an expectation that Mitchell's going to re-sign. Now, that's not done until it's done. And until it's done, you're going to see teams like the Miami Heat, the Los Angeles Lakers, and others continue to offer up themselves as suitors for Mitchell if he decides that he's not going to stay, which would probably force the Cavaliers to trade him. But if Mitchell re-signs, if he does sign that extension, carrying him through for the future with the Cavaliers, the question is then, what happens next? The Cavaliers have kind of projected that they're willing to go forward with their core 4, that they're locked into Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen. However, the question is going to be, does Garland want to stay paired up with Mitchell? It's been an awkward fit with Cleveland, but there is an idea, at least, that Garland may not stay with the Cavs long-term if Mitchell signs the extension. With the ability to kind of reshape that roster this summer, especially if they were to trade Garland, there's a number of ways to make that work. But on the other hand, Allen is probably the most expendable of the 4 players, with Mobley's upside still being tremendous, especially after strong playoffs, Garland's value as a primary point guard, and Mitchell obviously is a superstar. Everyone's going to be very curious to see what happens and if the Cavs will in fact keep this core 4 together or if there'll be more changes on the horizon. That's your top 4 storylines for the NBA summer. That's outside of, the Lakers, because they're the Lakers. We'll keep it all on track and get you updated, as well as not only on the news, but also the betting odds in the market as the NBA drama season rolls on at actionnetwork.com and in the Action Network app.